My wife and daughter left me while I was fighting cancer alone. Years later, they came back. Not for me, but for the $8 million they thought I left behind. Let's just say, their names weren't anywhere in the will. Hello Reddit I plus here. So I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this. But here we are. A few years ago, my life imploded. In the span of months, I lost my health, my family, and my faith in people. Now, years later, the same people who walked out on me when I was at my lowest came back. Not out of love, not to apologize, but to steal what they thought was mine, and what they believed was now theirs. But they had no idea what was waiting for them. My name's Rowan, and at 43, I thought I had a pretty good life. I ran my own design firm, worked out regularly, didn't drink or smoke, and adored my family. My wife, Melanie, and our 17-year-old daughter, Grace, were my world. We lived in a comfortable home that I inherited from my grandfather, a brilliant man who built a fortune in architecture. We weren't flashy, but we were secure, or so I thought. Then one winter afternoon, I was sitting in my doctor's office staring at a diagnosis I couldn't pronounce properly: Stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. My oncologist told me survival was possible, but it would be brutal. Months of chemotherapy, radiation, and maybe surgery. I remember driving home numb, barely feeling my hands on the steering wheel. When I told Melanie and Grace, they both cried. Melanie hugged me and said, "We'll fight this together, okay? You're not alone," I believed her. The first few weeks were a blur. Chemotherapy hit me harder than I'd imagined. I went from running 5 miles a day to barely making it up the stairs. My muscles ached, my hair fell out, and I was constantly nauseous. Melanie tried at first, cooking soups, driving me to treatments. Grace helped too, though reluctantly. But after a few months, I noticed the shift. The looks of sympathy turned into sighs of annoyance. The once cheerful chatter at dinner turned into silence. One morning, when I asked Melanie to drop me off for chemo, she groaned and said, "Can't you just get an Uber?" I barely slept last night. That was the first time I realized I was no longer a husband in her eyes. I was an obligation. Things deteriorated quickly. She started spending more time at work, even though she only worked part-time at a boutique. Grace stopped talking to me altogether. Eventually, my doctor recommended I hire a part-time nurse. That's when Nora entered my life. A retired oncology nurse in her 50s with a calm, no-nonsense attitude. She took care of me like family. She cooked, cleaned, made sure I took my meds, and even sat with me when I couldn't sleep. For the first time in months, I felt human again. But Melanie hated her. She accused me of bringing a stranger into our marriage. I explained it was temporary, but she wouldn't hear it. A week later, I came home from treatment to find half the house empty. Drawers, closets, even the framed family photos were gone. Melanie left a note on the counter. "I can't do this anymore. Grace and I need space. I'm sorry, that's it." No goodbye, no explanation. Just an empty house and the echo of their absence. The months that followed were hell. I nearly gave up more than once. If not for Nora and my younger brother Damon, I don't think I'd have made it. Damon came every weekend to check in, and one day he told me, "You need to focus on recovery, not resentment." Let them go. He was right. I focused on surviving. Miraculously, after 8 months of treatment, my scans came back clear. The cancer was gone. I was weak, bald, and 40 pounds lighter, but I was alive. When Damon heard, he hugged me and said, "Grandpa would be proud of you, man." Speaking of Grandpa, his estate was finally being transferred to me that year. He had left behind a trust worth about $8 million, most of which was tied up in property, stocks, and a few patents. But I wasn't planning to flaunt it. I just wanted peace. So, I quietly moved to a new town, away from the house that felt like a ghost museum of broken promises. Nora helped me settle in, and Damon visited often. Slowly, I started my life over. 3 years passed. I didn't hear a word from Melanie or Grace. Not a text, not a birthday message, nothing. Then, one summer afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer, Mr. Holden. He sounded urgent. "Rowan, we need to talk. It's about your estate. There's been an inquiry about your will." That was strange because I had just updated my will 2 months prior. When I arrived at his office, he slid a document across the table. It was a copy of a death certificate. My death certificate. Someone had reported me as deceased to the state registry, and guess who had filed the claim? Melanie and Grace. They believed I had passed away, and they were trying to collect the inheritance. At first I was too stunned to speak. Holden told me they had even gone to the house where I used to live and convinced the new tenants to let them in, claiming they were retrieving sentimental items. They had been trying to liquidate my grandfather's trust through a fraudulent probate claim. The audacity was almost impressive. Holden and I quietly decided to let them proceed, just to see how far they'd go. I documented everything, recorded calls, and waited. A month later, Melanie and Grace arrived in town. I saw them for the first time in 3 years. Both dressed like they hadn't missed a single spa appointment. Grace looked older, colder. They met with Holden to finalize the transfer. And that's when I walked in. I'll never forget the look on their faces. Grace gasped like she'd seen a ghost. Melanie went pale and dropped her handbag. "You're supposed to be dead," she blurted. I smiled and said, "Yeah, I've heard that a few times. Unfortunately for you, rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated. They tried to spin it, of course, said they were misinformed, that they thought I'd passed away because they hadn't heard from me. But the paperwork they'd submitted was undeniable fraud. I didn't press criminal charges, though I could have. Instead, I did something better. I updated my will again, leaving everything to a foundation for cancer patients who were abandoned by their families. I made sure their names were completely removed from every document. When Melanie found out, she broke down. Grace tried to apologize, saying she was young and didn't understand. But I just told her, you can't fake love when it's convenient. Family isn't a title, it's a choice. And then I walked away. It's been 5 years since that day. I'm still cancer-free. Nora passed away last year, and I named one of the new charity centers in her honor, the Nora Haven Foundation. Damon helps me run it. Sometimes I wonder what Melanie and Grace tell people when they talk about me. Probably that I was cold or unforgiving, but that's okay. I learned the hard way that peace is worth more than revenge. Still, there's something poetic about it. The ones who left me to die came crawling back when they thought I was gone, only to discover that the man they abandoned had already written them out of his life long before he signed his final will. I really thought that walking away from Melanie and Grace after the inheritance debacle would be the end of it. I had made peace with everything, or at least I thought I had. For the first time in years, I was living quietly. I spent my mornings volunteering at the cancer center, helping patients who didn't have support. The Nora Haven Foundation had grown faster than I ever expected. We were funding treatments, housing, and therapy programs across the state. I was actually happy again. Until one morning, my phone started blowing up. At first I ignored it, but when Damon called and said, "Dude, turn on channel 9, I knew something was wrong. And there it was, my face on the local news. The headline read, "Man fakes his own death to keep fortune from wife and daughter." I froze. The report claimed that I had staged my death to avoid responsibility toward my family, and that my poor, grieving wife and daughter had been blindsided when I reappeared, just to humiliate them. They had twisted everything. The segment featured Melanie, tearful, well-dressed, playing the victim perfectly. She told reporters, "He just disappeared. We thought he was gone." Then we find out he's been living secretly with another woman who helped him hide the money. She was talking about Nora, the nurse, the same woman who saved my life. That was the moment my shock turned into fury. I called Holden, my lawyer, and he was already ahead of it. "They've filed a civil suit," he said. "Defamation, emotional distress, and asset concealment. They're claiming you forged your own death to avoid supporting them." You'd think I'd laugh at the absurdity, but I knew how the court of public opinion worked. Once a narrative takes hold, facts don't matter. For weeks, my foundation's website was flooded with hate comments. Donors started pulling out. I was getting harassed online, strangers calling me a monster. Melanie had gone full PR mode. Grace, too. She gave an interview to a local magazine claiming, "My father replaced me with his nurse. He just cut us out like we never existed." The irony? She hadn't even texted me once since the day they left. I stayed silent for a while, even though everyone told me to fight back publicly. But the truth was, I didn't want to sink to their level. That changed when Grace posted a TikTok video that went viral. It was full of fake screenshots, texts from Dad apologizing for abandoning them, which she obviously fabricated. That was the final straw. I sat down with my lawyer and said, "Let's end this." We gathered everything. Every message, every financial record, every signed fraudulent document from the fake death certificate to the probate filings. Holden built the case methodically. Meanwhile, Damon convinced me to record a documentary-style interview about the real story. We didn't post it right away, we just had it ready. Then came the day of the hearing. Melanie walked into court like she was stepping onto a movie set. Designer bag, immaculate hair, crocodile tears ready. Grace sat beside her, visibly uncomfortable, but still playing along. When Melanie's lawyer started, he painted me as a cold-hearted, manipulative narcissist who faked his death to deprive his innocent family of security. Then, it was Holden's turn. He projected the fraudulent death certificate onto the courtroom screen. "This," he said calmly, "was filed by Mrs. Winters and her daughter under penalty of perjury." The room went silent. Then he played recorded audio. Phone calls between Melanie and an estate clerk, where she clearly discussed claiming the money before anyone notices. Grace's face went white. Melanie looked like she'd been punched. It got worse for them when Holden brought out the original nursing invoices and text messages showing I was under care for cancer during the exact time they claimed I was hiding another life. By the time we were done, the judge looked disgusted. Their lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't file again. The judge even referred the case to the district attorney for potential fraud and perjury charges. Melanie lost it in court, screaming about how I had turned her daughter against her. The irony of that moment still makes me laugh. But that wasn't the end. When the story broke publicly, this time with the truth, the internet flipped. My documentary interview went live on YouTube the same day the court documents were released. It showed everything: the abandonment, the nurse's kindness, the fraud, the fake death certificate. People flooded the comments with support. Survivors of cancer shared their own stories. Donations to the foundation tripled within a month. Meanwhile, Melanie and Grace became social pariahs. The boutique Melanie worked at fired her after customers protested outside. Grace lost her scholarship when her university reviewed her involvement in the fraud case. I didn't celebrate it, but I also didn't feel sorry. You can't sow poison and expect flowers to grow. About a year later, I was leaving the foundation one evening when I saw someone waiting outside. It was Grace. She looked completely different. No makeup, no entourage, just a tired, regretful kid. She said quietly, "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know Mom faked that certificate. She told me you ran away with that nurse and didn't want me anymore." I believed her, or at least part of me wanted to. She had been manipulated, sure, but she also chose to believe it because it was easier than facing the truth. I told her, "I forgave you a long time ago, but forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were." She nodded, crying, and asked if she could volunteer at the foundation. I said yes. For the first time in years, I saw a glimpse of the daughter I once knew. Melanie, on the other hand, vanished. Rumor has it she moved 2 states over under her maiden name, working at a small salon. The DA didn't press full charges. They gave her probation in exchange for restitution payments, but she never paid a cent. Sometimes I think about confronting her one last time, just to ask why. But then I remind myself, some questions don't need answers. Because the truth is, she already gave me the answer years ago when she packed her bags and left me to die. Now, I'm 49. Still cancer-free. Still running the Nora Haven Foundation. Grace manages our youth outreach program, helping other families reconnect after medical trauma. She told me once, "I lost you when I listened to the wrong person. I won't make that mistake again. That's enough for me." If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that sometimes the people who betray you are the ones you'd take a bullet for. And sometimes surviving, truly surviving, is the sweetest revenge there is. After my wife and daughter tried to fake my death to steal my inheritance, they took me to court and slandered me publicly, but I had proof of everything. I cleared my name, exposed their lies, and built a life they could never touch. Now, I help others rebuild theirs, because I know exactly how it feels to be abandoned and still come out stronger than ever.